We are really pleased to have Ajahn Tan today as our speaker. She is going to talk about her field experiment in Nan, and she has 40 minutes. And after that, we are going to have a Q&A. During her talk, you can also leave your question in the chat room. So Dan, you can take over the presentation.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to present this paper because it's been with me for a long time, and now the analysis has been pulled out. So it's a paper on impacts of access to book corners and reading diaries, literacy scores, and self-control using evidence from field experiment in Nan, Thailand. So it's going to be a slightly different paper from the papers that have been presented in this series, in the sense that we are not using observational data, but we are using experimental data here. And I'm not a single author. I have 6 wonderful co-authors who I think are here with us today. The first one is Ajahn Montagan from Social Research Institute next door. She's an expert on running field work. And we're very fortunate to have Pipikun Kantawang from Ministry of Education. And Ajahn Titi from Faculty of Humanities, Srinakarin Virod University. He's an expert on library science. Ajahn Kirati from Faculty of Education, Jula. She is an expert on primary school student. And Ajahn Pornpimon from Faculty of Education, Silpakorn University. She's an expert on education technology. Last but not least, Ajahn Patapon Sukonthaman from College of Population Studies next door. She's also an economist, graduated from the LSE. So if for PhD students who are interested in development and population economics, you can seek advice from her as well, but be gentle. She's very busy and very nice. Okay, next. Let me motivate you a little bit first with the quotation from Charles Eliot. He was a longest-serving president of Harvard University. So he says that books are the quietest and most constant of friends. They are the most accessible and wisest of counselors and the most patient of teachers. So this kind of epitomizes the role of books. So they are not just collection of pages. They provide us with companionship, guidance, and lessons as well. Likewise, in a quite recent paper by Brunello et al. In EJ, they show that with observational data for Europeans who have more books at home as children, when they grow up, they also have higher wages or higher returns to education as well. So from this work, it suggests that books in general can have a positive impact on human capital formation. So as economists, even you are not interested in how children are doing and how we can enhance outcome of education, if you are interested in a bigger macro picture like economic growth, as we have found that human capital is one of the essential factors that drives growth, so this research can be of relevance as well. In addition, what we have found in developing as well as some developed countries like in the UK, there are some children who have lesser access to inputs such as books and hence lower life outcomes. So this our paper can touch on this issue of poverty and inequality reduction as well. Okay, so that's how relevant our paper could be. And on a more practical sphere, okay, so we have seen quite a number of international and national organizations that put forward policies and campaigns that encourage reading and access to storybooks among children in a hope to enhance their life outcomes. Okay. However, if we look at studies, more recent studies that are based on experimental data, field experiment, it has been found that there's very little effect or limited effect of access to books and textbooks on skill and scores. For example, in a seminal paper by Chloe et al., one of the co-authors is Michael Kramer, who received the Nobel Prize last year. They found that giving textbooks in Kenya matters very little and only for stronger students. And next, from Aberis et al., I hope I pronounce this correctly, paper in Journal of Human Resource, which I see as the closest paper to ours. They assess the program that gives age-appropriate reading material with new pedagogical approach in the Philippines. And they find the impact on reading skills, but not other types of test scores. And Balcom and he, 2012, they analyzes the libraries program in India, also find very limited effect. So far in the literature, emphasis has been given more to the development of right pedagogical approach, for example, pushed forward by Banerjee and Duflo. But if we look more closely to this research on books and textbooks, we can actually see that there's innate characteristics of the setup that could contribute to the limited impacts of books and textbooks. For example, language barrier. So in the paper, in Kenyan paper, textbooks are written in English, but the mother tongues of children are not English. So that is a barrier of utilizing books. And most of the time, they analyze the effects that come together between inputs and pedagogy. So we cannot really distinguish the effects between the two. And Aberis et al., for example, they look only at a limited age range of children. Okay, so in this paper, what we have tried is to complement existing literature by using experiment in Thailand as a setup, and that's an advantage about that. This besides the fact that we are based in Thailand. Okay, so there's no language barrier as such. So Thai is used throughout, and we analyze the effect of the input effect, because reading activities are already exist in those schools, and there's no change before and after the experiment. So we can say pretty much that the effect can come from input effect. And we cover wider age range of children, like all primary school children in the sample. And what I see as the strongest contribution of this paper is that we actually look at a larger set of impacts. So not only like in the literature that we look at cognitive ability, such as literacy scores, okay? We also look at personality traits that increasingly in labor economics and economics of psychology find that they are actually very fundamental to life outcomes on top of cognitive ability. And the personality traits that we are looking at here is self-control or self-discipline, and I'll explain later why. Okay, so here's the motivation. And now let's have a look at our experimental design. Okay, so basically we have for PhD students, in case you are not familiar with randomized control trial, let me explain a little bit why it could be advantageous compared to observational design. So here field experiment is pioneered by last year Nobel Prize winners Banerjee, Duflo, and Kramer in terms of methodologically, in a hope to overcome the exogeneity problem. So endogeneity problem, I'm sorry. So let's have a look at the case of giving books. For example, if you have observational data, you survey like how many books people have as children at home, and then see whether when they grow up, their wages, those with more books have more higher wages or not. So in that case, number of books can be confounded with many factors. For example, parental income, parental wealth, and culture, for example. So when you assess the impact of books, is confounded by these factors. So we have endogeneity problems. So the measurement is biased and inconsistent. But with experimental design, the way that the books are given is totally random. Okay, so it's uncorrelated with characteristics of children. So when we compare those with and without books, we can safely say that the effect is solely from the treatment, the book effect. Okay, so this is so the economists try to resemble the lab experiment from science subjects, for example. Okay, so here our experimental design, we have 62 schools in 9 provinces. So our randomization is based on school level instead of children level, so that the spillover effect is minimized. Okay, schools are far apart, so the treatment shouldn't be a spill to the control. And then these are randomly chosen by computer generation process from the list of schools in Lower Nan. And they are divided, again, randomly assigned by a computer generation process into 3 groups. The first group is treatment, we call it treatment 1, are schools that have book corners and reading diaries. And reading diaries are put there to test. So book corners is about testing resource constraint input effect. And reading diaries is about testing whether providing incentive would matter as on top of input, okay? But treatment 2 will have only book corners. And then for control group, they have nothing, okay? So this is exogenously assigned program. So let's have a look a bit of how the distribution of school in the sample. So here's the Nan province in the far north of Thailand, okay? And we only look at the lower part of Nan, okay? So here, one of the reasons is that Nan is very mountainous, so it makes our travel easier if we just limit the area here. And smaller area also ensures us that the unobserved differences such as culture is comparable, okay? So here we can see that the triangles are schools in treatment 1, circles are school in treatment 2, and then here we have control group in squares. So they are evenly distributed throughout the area, even if we didn't do stratification, okay? So next, so like all the field experiment work, so we analyze baseline comparison if the budget and time permit. So here, baseline comparison, meaning that before the program is installed, before the treatment is installed, whether they are comparable, the control and treatment groups are comparable or not. So here is at school level. So we can see that here's the mean number of students in control treatment 1, treatment 2, and this is the this coefficient capturing the differences. So we can see that there's no statistically significant difference between the number of students in these schools. And this is important because these are government-run schools, and their resources, facilities are given proportionately to the number of students. So number of students can be sufficient statistics that tells about other infrastructure as well. And here we can say that they are comparable, these schools. And they already had libraries in school with books, but as reported and as we have seen by ourselves, there are not all of them are suitable for children, and even if for children books, they're not very inviting. Most of them are donated books. So these are not rich schools, so small government schools. And here, the number of books and children books are comparable, including books per student as well. And all except two schools had reading activities, and they are the same throughout. Okay. And next, let's have a look at a baseline comparison at children's level. Here is about children's characteristics. So we have data on age, sex, height and weight that can be calculated into BMI, number of siblings, and very unique to this data set, we have parental or guardian's income as well. So we can see that most except sex and then BMI are comparable between treatments and control. But we are not too worried about the difference because we are going to put them in the regression to control for them as well later on. Okay. All right. So next, let's have a look at the nature nature of our experiment. Okay, so what we have given to schools. So first we gave them, sorry, book corners. Okay, so it comprises of grade appropriate books. Okay, so all of us have read those books. Okay, and we really carefully selected it. Like the process is like for a year, and then they were again evaluated by experts. Altogether, each treatment school has 129 books, which cover literature, popular science, and books that build up characters and creativity. Okay. On average, although the number seems small, like 1.68 books per children in treatment school, but these books are really different from the books that they had before in the library. They're more inviting. It's been reported that children loved them. Okay, hence they should be more favorable towards reading activities. And here, not only books that we installed, we have reading corners with Julia's pink shelves, and
Look like there is a connection problem.
Okay, so am I back now?
Yeah, you're back now. So please
okay,
resume.
So sorry.
Resume the screen.
Okay, so is this covered before I'm unconnected? before I disconnect.
This one. We are.
Okay.
We are here.
Okay. So we're done with books. So here is a book corners that we have installed. So they are grade appropriate books, and we've read all the books, and they are evaluated again by experts. So on average, 129 books are given per school, covering literature, popular science, building up characters and creativity. Although the number per student seems to be small, these books kind of matter for students because they are very different from what they had before from the donation. Okay, so children love the book from the report, and we also provide the corners with a pink glass shelf, and then reading table and mats. Okay, so not only inputs as books, we also provide atmosphere that hopefully generate the reading activities as well. So next, so for treatment 2 groups, schools are given reading diaries as well. So these are carefully designed by Ajahn Pornpimon. Okay, so for example, this is for grade 2. So there's a cover, and then they say there are 28 books for grade 2. So for each page is for each book. So this is a kind of the name of the book and your favorite characters from the book, and why you like this book and what you get from reading this book, and then there's a bit of exercises. Okay. And here's the timeline of the experiment. So basically, we have baseline survey or pre-test before installation of the book corners back in June 2017. It's a few years ago. We just finished cleaning up data and then analyzing it. And then in the same trip, we went to the treatment schools to provide the treatments, which were book corners in June 2017 as well. So that's the beginning of the academic year for children. And then we had first round survey to collect data after the experiment. The first one was in Feb and March back in 2018. Okay, so that gave students kind of a year. And then we have the second round survey in July 2018. So notice that this was after the summer holiday and at the beginning of the next academic year. So here, this second round survey was there so that we can assess the longer term effect. And notice that it's just the beginning of the academic year. So children were not yet exposed to classes, new classes, but they would be tested by the advanced grade that they moved into. Okay, so this is there to test as well how the treatment can prepare children to understand more advanced literacy level before having learned it in classes. Okay. So in this presentation, I'm going to present the first round survey. Okay. Here, let's talk a bit about the outcomes, the data of the outcomes of interest as well. So what we are looking at is the children level outcome. The first one is cognitive ability or literacy scores. So let me recap it a bit. So why is it important to look at literacy scores? So literacy is actually the most basic skill that matter for long-run human capital outcomes, okay? And our literacy scores are actually based on a newly constructed literacy tests by grades, okay? So these are designed and run by Ajahn Montagan and Pipikun from Ministry of Education. So The dimensions actually cover reading comprehension, writing, word work, such as phonics, spelling, vocabulary, sentence work, grammar, punctuation. And it's based on standardized syllabus so that we are not biased in favor of treatment groups, okay? And tests also were piloted in a school in Paris so that we can ensure that the raw test scores are well distributed, okay? And as usual in the literature, the scores are normalized by subtracting the mean in the control group and then divided by control group standard deviation. So it's a standardized test score. The other main outcome variable that we are interested in is self-control. So why is it important? So just as I said before at the beginning of the, I was going to say lecture, no, the presentation is that personality traits have predictive power over life cycle of economic success. For example, shown in this seminal paper by Morgan, Duckworth, and Heckman and Will. This is the Heckman and Duckworth is she's a psychologist, an author of Grit book, if you have read it before. So what the literature has shown so far is the correlation between personality traits and life cycle outcome. But what we ask a further question that as an economist, can we intervene this formation of these traits besides those that were derived from nature and nurture, okay? And we think that reading books actually requires patience and attention. So this could be related to one of the personality traits, which is self-control. So if you are not familiar with self-control concept, so think about Marshmallow Experiments, the famous one back in 1972 by Stanford psychologists, that they put each child in a room with a marshmallow. So if the child could not resist and picked that marshmallow straight away, he or she could only have one marshmallow. But if he or she can be patient and wait for a bigger goal, which comprised of 2 marshmallows, okay, so if they can wait, they would get 2 marshmallows in the end. And so this is about patience and so delay so that you get higher reward. And then they look at the long-term outcome of these children. So they follow these children. So they find that they have those who can resist the temptation actually had a higher SAT scores, better education outcome, and work outcome when they grow up. Okay, so based on this kind of idea, so we focus on self-control or self-discipline, which is defined as the ability to suppress proponent responses in the service of a higher goal, okay? And such a choice, psychologists find that it's not automatic, but requires conscious effort. So it's something that can be built up, and perhaps reading and books could help, okay? And the authors of self-control is impulsivity, and impulsivity is defined as the inability to regulate behavior, attention, and emotions in the service of valued goals. So here you can see that attention pops up as one of the main dimensions. So here we are using Ising Impulsivity Questionnaire. But there's a classic one back presented in his paper in 1984. Ising was a British-German psychologist, the prominent one. So here are the set of 23 self-control questions. So you can see that they range from kind of being able to do something that is kind of boring, like sitting on a chair. And then it's about impulse, emotion, but there are two questions that we think that are related to attentiveness, paying attention, which are, do you usually work quickly without bothering to check your answers? And do you sometimes put down the first answer that comes into your head during the test and forget to check it later? So, so we ask students these questions, and then we evaluate its relation with our treatments. Oops. Okay, so here are the baseline comparison in terms of outcome variables. So these are before the experiment is run. So this gave me a headache for some days, because actually, although we do randomization, it's really random. We find that there's actually significant difference between treatments and control in terms of literacy, test score, and overall self-control. But then, what we can defend is that with randomization, there's also a probability that this significant difference can pop up. And based on the literature, we have to control for this baseline test score anyhow in the regression. So this difference is controlled for later. Okay. And other dimensions of outcomes are not statistically different for the baseline, including reading attitudes and library using behavior that I'll be talking about later as well. Okay. So let's have a look at the empirical estimation. So given that we have randomized experiments, so the problem of endogeneity is actually very limited or mitigate or it's not there. Okay, so our estimation model is very straightforward. So for example, for literacy score, we have what we are interested in explaining is the score of individual I, children I, from school S at time T. And we control for that baseline score, the lagged score from the past period. And then here, treatment 1 and treatment 2 is a binary variable saying whether the children is in the school that have treatment 1 or treatment 2 or not. So the comparison group is the control group. So the estimated beta 3 and beta 4 will tell us the difference between the treatment in comparison to the control. And next, we're also interested in the differential effects of the treatment. So actually this follows the literature as well. The treatment could be differential or varies amongst different types of children as well. So here we think that probably it varies according to the original literacy level scores, original scores that they have. So here, beta 5 and beta 5 and beta 6 from the interaction terms will tell us whether stronger students actually benefit more from the treatment or not. And then we control for other characteristics. And importantly, our errors are clustered at school level so that we allow for unobserved correlation between children within the same school. Okay, so in this presentation, let's have a look at the first post-test. So 1 year after the installation of the treatment or book corners and reading diary, what happened? Okay, so the first 2 columns tell us about the overall effect. So if we just lump students together from all the grade groups, what happened? So here you can see with the interaction terms here, we don't see any statistically significant effect of the treatment 1 and treatment 2 when compared with the control group. Okay, we could have stopped here and say, okay, there's no effect from book corners. Now, but actually we can ask ourselves further, But children can be different by their age and grade, right? So let's have a look inside whether the effects vary according to their grade. So here we have the results in grade groups. So for grade 1, we can see that there's no average effect of the treatments, okay? But here, from the interaction terms, you can find that for a very small student, treatment 1 that has reading diary as well can have an effect on good students, on stronger students, on higher grade students. Okay, so it complements stronger students. For slightly a bit older but still small young students, okay, so we don't find average effect either, but also stronger students benefit from having only books corners and having reading diaries on top as well. Okay, so they have higher literacy scores compared to the treatment, to the controls and average students in the treatment. And for older students, like grades 4 to 6, and these are the grades that they are more comfortable at with readings by themselves. Okay, so here we find average effect of the treatment too. So on average, students in schools that have book corners actually have higher literacy score than the control group on average. And here it's very interesting that we have negative coefficient for interaction with between pretest and treatment too. So what does it mean? It means that actually for older students and book corners actually complements weaker students more. So weaker students can actually exploit the benefit of having books at the margin more than stronger students. Okay, so what we can conclude from here. So we find that access to book corners enhances literacy score, but vary by age. Okay, so for little children, it's more pronounced. For stronger students, could be because of they're not very good at reading like by age. Okay, but however, for higher grades, access to book corners improves literacy on average as well as complements our weaker students. So this is in contrast to what has been found in Glua et al. In Kenya, that textbooks actually complement stronger students because language barrier. But here we find that it actually can be a meaningful instrument that can benefit disadvantaged students more. Okay. However, this is kind of sad because we had a high hope for reading diaries, but actually we didn't find a significant effect of reading diaries apart from the partial effect on stronger students for grades 2 and 3. But there's reason for that. We conducted an interview with teachers, and teachers in group treatment to schools. They reported that they and their students find that having to complete reading diaries can be really stressful because children do not enjoy the task and perceive it as another set of homework. So it can actually nullify the impact of access to book corners as we have found in older children. Okay. Next, we want to open the black box. So first we want to check that the effect that we have found so far from having book corners to better literacy score actually comes from more reading, actually comes from the activities, the reading itself, not confounded by other thing else, although we know that we have randomizations, and this can open the black box about the mechanism as well. So we actually also ask children on reading attitude and activity. So the first question is, how often do you read non-textbooks or storybooks? So 0 is never, 1 some days or every day. And do you like reading non-textbooks? So this is about shaping preference and attitude. Do you like reading non-textbook or storybooks or not? Okay. So to my relief, so we have found that students in treatment 1 and treatment 2 actually read more books, okay, more often, read books more often than children in control groups, okay. So this can provide us the channel through which the experiment can have an effect, okay. And the effect is stronger for a stronger student for treatment 2 as well. But whether they are enjoying reading non-textbooks or not, we have found no evidence in the short run, at least. This could be because forming preference can be a longer process than 1 academic year, for example. Okay. And next, because we not only providing books, we also provide an environment like changing the layout of the library. So we also have a questionnaire that asks about the use of the library as well. So the first one is whether the students know what and where the library is, okay, in their school, and whether the students think that the library is a restful reading space, and whether it's a peaceful place that students can focus on reading, doing homework, and other activities. Oops, there should be an I there. So here, library using attitudes and behavior. So we have found that so that's a very comforting result that students in treatment 1 and treatment 2 actually know more about, they know what the library and where the library is compared to the control groups, okay? And that is stronger for stronger students as well. And for treatment 2, they report that the library is a restful reading space compared to what is been reported by the control groups. For both treatments, they find that library is a peaceful place that one can focus. So notice the word focus here. So here we find that now students can be kind of sunk into the environment that they can shape up attention and be more focused. Okay, so that leads us to the next question. So if our treatments are associated with activity that actually requires focus and attentiveness, could this lead to the formation of self-control? Okay, as self-control is a multifaceted concept, not only on the process, but on the domain as well. For example, there are works that analyze emotion-based versus attention-based self-control, and interpersonal self-control versus schoolwork domain of self-control. So here we see that books could be more related to attention-based self-control. So we now focus on the 2 questions from the questionnaire that, do you usually work quickly?
Look like there is a loss in connection again.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
All right, that's okay.
Okay, so let's get back. Okay.
Yep.
So we're here, right? Okay. So
yes.
Okay, so here we ask further question whether if we think that our treatments are, and shown in the last result that our treatments are associated with activity that requires focus and attentiveness, okay, could this lead to the formation of self-control? And as self-control is a multifaceted concept, say emotion-based versus attention-based, interpersonal versus schoolwork domain. Now we are focusing on attention-based, okay? So 2 questions. Do you usually work quickly without bothering to check your answers? And do you sometimes put down the first answer that comes into your head during the test and forget to check it later? So let's have a look at the results. So for overall self-control that we add up 23 answers together, we actually find no statistically evidence of impact of treatments, okay? So although it's suggestively negative effect, it's not significant. So when we look at the 2 questions, we actually find that having book corners and on top of it reading activity leads to the reduction in the behavior that the students are not attentive, okay? So here is minus, so this reduction of impulsivity, okay, and more for stronger students as well, less so for the second question. So actually, we find that treatments actually affect other self-control questions as well. For example, the intertemporal related questions like saving and gambling. Okay, this leads to a reduction as well, but I haven't actually put it here. So here, so approaching 40, I think it's time. So let's conclude. So here, so in contrast to existing studies on the role of inputs, so we find that book corners can improve literacy score, but it depends on age of children. In particular, it can complement weaker students more for the higher grades as well. And importantly, we find some evidence of the impact on personality trait. And next, we want to analyze more dimensions of self-control, and we do have to analyze the second post-test, which we expect that the effect can be fading away. Okay, and I actually ran a quick regression yesterday, and I saw that actually for the second post-test, the effects only last for older students, okay, on average, not complementing weaker students. And we also have data on other types of test scores that we can try. And as we have attrition problem for some schools, we have to take that into account in the future as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. That is a very informative talk. I myself learned a lot about this study, and I have a young kid at home, so this is my personal interest.